Hey everybody, Or here, and today I want to show you how to make MINDst Drums play like your favorite drummer. Now I've made this track. For a track like this, my ideal drummer would be somebody like Nate Smith. He's one of my personal favorites, and he has this amazing ability to deliver intensity and groove in these tight, funky tracks, while also feeling quite loose and, comfortable with the music. So I'm hoping to uncover a bit of what goes into a drummer's style by making decisions in velocity, in articulations, drum sound, and also in the actual composition. So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea on how to make MINDst Drums, or any drum VST for that matter, sound more alive, more realistic, and like the drummer is actually listening to the track he's playing and not just like, sounding like a sampler. You get the idea. Let's get going. So first of all, let's listen to the track. Now let's solo just the drum track so we get familiar with the groove we're playing here, and check it out. There we go, we can loop that. You can very clearly hear that this sounds very funky and alive and all that good stuff. For reference, let's use a very natural sounding preset without any processing and without any changes to dynamics with MINDst Drums. So let's just listen to it like this. This sounds pretty good also, I might say, but if you do like an A-B, so it's clear that the preset is much more in the right style, in the correct style for this sort of music. Let's check it out. Let's see how we can make the init preset sound more and more like the actual preset I ended up using. So before going into drum sounds at all, the first things I like to do is deal with the drummer itself. So how the drummer feels when he's playing. You can kind of imagine like you're talking to a drummer, so the first thing you might say is something like, hey, don't play so loud, which I guess is quite a common thing to say to drummers. So you can open the master velocity here and just set an overall limit to the amount of velocity layers the drummer uses. Now we have a ton of velocity layers in MINDst Drums. So what I like doing is simply playing the playback and I'll start dragging down on this upper limit here until I hear something approximating what I'd like to hear from a drummer playing. So yeah, this feels about right. What I'm looking to hear is, first of all, the difference between the lowest hit and the loudest hit. Of course, you can go into the MIDI programming and handpick the velocities and use the entire velocity range. But I think like it's way easier and much more fun to just program the drums a certain way and then see how much you can get out of the plugin itself. So this feels about right. Maybe I'll drag it slightly lower. This feels about right. Cool. The next thing I want to do is set up velocity curves for the hi-hat and the snare. Now, let's start with the hi-hat. Now, in this sort of style, and especially if it's Nate playing, the hi-hat tends to be fairly aggressive. So you want to attack the hi-hat in a way that even the lower notes get a bump up in terms of the velocity they're being played. So I'm just going to click in the middle here and drag up. Well, that's too much. And drag slightly up to give it a small like belly here. Let's listen to it. This is too much. I can also just split it by double clicking and then drag this part up just to make the softer ones more accentuated. That sounds pretty cool. And let's do the same for the snare. So I'm going to click the snare here and let's listen to it. So what I tried doing here with the snare is basically have the ghost notes play a bit louder while making the upper velocities a tiny bit harder to reach, because we are looking at a style here which doesn't have these huge hits on the center snare, and we do have a separate articulation for rim shots which are loud anyway. So after setting up the overall velocity and the velocity curves for the hi-hat and the snare, see the master curve here, hi-hat velocity and snare velocity. Cool. So I'll click the hi-hat over here, and we can start by what I think is one of the coolest features we implemented here in MINDst Drums, which is the alternate hands mode. You can have MINDst's hi-hat play with either one hand or two hands. The difference is mainly in the flow and sort of alternating feeling. Each stick hits a different area on the hi-hat, and no matter how good you are, there's always a difference between your hands, and that's a good thing. So I'm just going to solo the hi-hat and switch between the modes so you can check out which one sounds better. One hand, two hands, one hand again. You can clearly hear that in the little 30-second notes there, it does sound better with two hands on the hi-hat, and overall I kind of enjoy that feeling more, of having more of a difference between a consecutive hi-hat hits. So I'm going to leave it at two hands, and this is sort of a very fun button to mess around with. You'd be surprised at how much it affects the feeling of hi-hat based grooves. The next thing I want to deal with is how open the hi-hat gets when the bites happen. So there's areas where the hi-hat just opens and shuts really quickly. Let's look for this part. Let's loop just that bar. Yeah, I think this one sounds about right. In the velocity menu for most drums that have several articulations, you have a velocity split. And by clicking it, I can split the velocity range between tip and shank articulations. Now, if you find the sweet spot in these kind of grooves, it sounds so cool. You can clearly hear the softer hits being played with the tip of the stick while the louder hits being played with the shank. It really contributes to adding another layer of variation on the hi-hat, and it's something very common that drummers would do, and going towards making your drum sound more alive. So let's listen to the groove, and I'm going to fine-tune the shank tip slider here. So this is tip all the way. The shank all the way. Now let's listen to it in context with the entire kit playing. This sounds so cool. I do want the hi-hat slightly aggressive, so maybe even slide it further down towards tip. Yeah, that means that I won't have to worry about changing the articulation manually, and I can just have the velocity slider here do it for me, and I can just program the drums, and the articulation would play on its own. The next thing I want to deal with is the snare sound. There are a few unique features we can go into with the snare. The first thing I want to do, as a huge impact on the sound of the snare, is select a snare zone. The snare was sampled in 3 zones. They're fully sampled, so every articulation is available on all 3 zones in full depth of dynamic layers and round robins. Each zone has its own distinct character, and let's listen to all 3 of them being alternated here. For me, the center is the drier sound. It's more accurate and punctual. B is the Goldilocks zone, and C has a more pronounced ghost note and overtone. But for this kind of track, I want zone C. I want the ghost notes to pop out, and I want the snare to have this kind of presence and overtone, and it's supposed to feel a bit rude and not like super accurate. The only thing I automated here is the intro has this really dense snare fill, and I did want it on zone A. So let's listen to zone A on the fill here, and then see how I automated it to change to zone C. And let's do the intro on zone C. Zone A, zone C, zone B. Yeah, I still think zone A sounds the best for this sort of drum fill here. So moving on from snare zones, I do like in these kind of tracks tuning the snare up a bit. So I don't go all the way. I usually do like 150 cents up, or maybe even 100. Yeah, so tuning it up a bit gives it a sort of a happier, tighter sound. I really enjoy that. I think in the context of the song, it works wonders. So check this out. I really feel it brings out the snare, and it's something you won't necessarily think about. You know, you might try to EQ the snare differently, but the tune knob here is one of my go-to knobs when I try to have the snare sit well in a track. Let's save this preset for a second. Yeah, I know my preset list is a mess because I'm a developer and everything is a mess. I'm gonna save that as funky init. Let's listen to the original init preset. This is kind of the drummer that failed the audition, and let's check out our funky init. This guy nailed it. So you can clearly hear how the drummer actually sounds like he's familiar with the genre that's being played, with the dynamic language and the articulation. And, you know, the hi-hat is cool and it's funky, and the music is driving way better with this in it. Now, the one thing we didn't mention yet is what happens in the mixer screen. So luckily, you don't have to do everything from scratch. So if I go to the A1 picks folder, I can grab light touch here, A1 light touch. And this is a fairly good starting point for tracks like this. Let's listen to it. Now, as I said, this is a good starting point, but I did put a bit more effort into this and created a new preset that you'll get together with this video. It's probably be posted in the description or something. And it's called It Ain't Nate. Yeah, I know. I'm a brilliant copywriter. So turn off the AC because I'm freezing. So It Ain't Nate, and the mixer preset is called Fearless, after Fearless Flyers. And let's go over some key elements here in this mixer sound. It sounds like this. So the difference between Light Touch and this one is that this is a bit darker, more compressed. It has a much more fluffy and tasty kind of drum sound while retaining some, intensity and aggression. You can clearly see the overheads are boosted like hell, like crazy. So the reason the overheads are boosted this much is that the majority of the sound basically comes from rooms, overheads, snare, and kick. So if I just solo these tracks, and then play the full mix. So you do hear the hi-hat being added here. I even turn it down a little bit. It gives a sense of direction and maybe make the hi-hat a bit more punctual. But the sound is supposed to feel like a drum kit played together in the same room, and the overheads and rooms give that image first and foremost. Check out how much the snare adds here. So I'm just going to solo the snare, and you can listen to the bleeds here. See, you're getting a full drum mix just from the snare channel. So that's why when I solo the snare, overheads, and room, you're not missing anything. So this is a trick that really helps the kit sound gel together. The bleeds on the snare is like magic for that. If you want your drums to sound more alive, you do need to learn how to use the bleed mixer properly. And just by messing around with this mixer here, and you see the setting isn't that complex. So except kick and hi-hat, most of the drums are pretty much leveled. I don't know if there's even a difference. Yeah, they're all like -10. This is something that I did pretty arbitrarily. I just wanted all the drums to be heard by the snare, and with a slight addition of the kick going into the snare drum. Now, in terms of processing, another cool trick that adds sustain and grit and crispiness is using drive. So this is I really love using really lightly mixed drive. It sounds like this. So I like putting it on like barely audible, so it just adds this tiny bit of sizzle to whatever is going on, and it has an accumulative effect. So you have a drive on the snare, but you also have one running on the room. Here, I think it's way more pronounced. Let's listen to it. Yeah, so it's doing its job here. So if I turn off both, check this out. That's such a huge part of the drum sound going on there. I see that here I also have it running on the hi-hat. Let's check this out. Yeah, also a huge difference maker here. Makes everything sound warmer, more vintagey. Here on the hi-hat, I'm running like a ton of gain, no high pass because I want the hi-hat to go in full effect into the distortion. Yeah, that's another cool trick you can use when mixing very lively drums. The last thing I want to show you here is what's going on in the master effects and reverbs. You can clearly see that I'm sending everything in fully into the studio reverb here. Let's start over here. And I'm using the tight studio reverb. So the reason I'm using this one, it allows sending a bunch of reverb on almost all the tracks. You know what? I'm going to send toms over here as well, and cymbals. Let's do everything. Let's go crazy. This is a very thin, almost transparent sounding studio, and you can see I'm boosting a ton of 500 just to give it a bit more warmth. I am cutting some high end, and let's exaggerate it for a second and see what it sounds like. So I absolutely love this one. There's also a long variation for it. So if you're craving a bit more of a tail on it. You know, for my taste, this is sort of the perfect studio reverb for tight sounding drums. Not much else needed. There's a tiny bit of plate going on the snare and overheads on the lush setting, which is a very harmonically rich reverb. It's so light. I mean, it's barely noticeable. Let's listen to it for a second. You know what? Let's listen to it on the chorus. Okay. Everything in moderation. So even here, there's not everything needs to be super pronounced. Sometimes you just want several elements that add a sense of togetherness to the kit, whether it's a long reverb, a short one, the overheads, the room, the snare bleeds. So you want every bit to contribute something in order to give that image of being in the room with the drummer and having the kit really hum. So all of these things really play well with our playback algorithms, which also kind of do similar things when it comes to making the kit gel together. So when you play consecutive snare hits, we play every second sample is what we call a reactive sample. So it's a second hit sample. So while the snare head is still resonating, we record another hit, and then we cut just the second hit. And our playback algorithm knows how to distribute these samples on every drum and cymbal. So, you know, playing consecutive rides or riding the crash cymbal, it just feels more natural, I guess, in MINDst Drums, because we make sure to calculate each drum sustain and give you the right consecutive hit sample without you needing to do anything. So all that stuff happens automatically. And now I want to go over the effects. They really push the drum sound and kind of put the finishing touches on it to really make it pop out. There's master compression here and a low pass filter. Let's listen to the compressor at first. It's doing a lot, as you can hear. So what I'm doing here is I'm using parallel compression, but really compressing heavily and using a lot of makeup. The reason for that is that I want the sound to retain some natural dynamics while also having that sort of fluffy compression feeling. So I am compressing heavily. I am having almost every hit here being compressed, especially with the kick drum. So this is grabbing mainly kick and snare, but it is affecting the entire kit, basically. This is a resonant low-pass filter. I have it set up a certain way. It's cutting until like 11 kilohertz. Let's listen to it in the context of the mix. It actually brightens the sound, so it does roll off some top end, but I did push some resonance, so it creates this sort of small peak, and it makes for a really nice way to keep the sound sort of vintage, but also maintain a spark. So within the context of the mix, you'll miss it once I bypass it. So as far as the mixer goes, this is just about it. The only thing that I sometimes want to add is if I don't feel the sound is driven enough and I want a bit more saturation and compression, I can use very mild parallel drive here. So let's listen to the drums with it and without it. You can clearly hear that it gets crispier even if I'm using like 2% mix here. Fun fact, this actually is a similar circuit, maybe a more simplistic one, but a similar circuit to what's running in Bitfuzzer. So if you grab Bitfuzzer, you can also use that as your saturation circuit, and it should sound really nice with what's going on here. It also has a parallel mode and a bunch of added features that go beyond what you have included here. So now I want to go over the composition part of a groove like this. So let's just listen to the first bar here. There's a few cool things happening over here. So first of all, on the hi-hat, you can see it plays every 16th note, and it has this general flow of soft, loud, soft, loud, soft, loud, and then 30-second notes here. Now, this is what I wanted to really zone in on. The 30-second notes here, just before the kick, creates this sort of pushy feeling towards the next part of the bar. So check this out. And without. I kind of miss it now because it makes the music sort of pop forward. It's a bit more fun. It's a bit more light-hearted. I don't know. Now, the next cool thing I want to go over here is what happens in the interaction between kick and snare. So I'm going to change my grid back to 16th notes, and you can look at this part here. Kick and snare are playing all the 16th notes here, and the reason this works well is because there's a lot of space before. So it's sort of a call and response approach. So I aired out the first part, and then I crowd the second part of the bar here. And check this out. So there's the major hits are rim shots. All other hits are ghost notes on the center snare or the regular snare. Now, if you zoom out, you'll notice that the rim shots are on every backbeat. So this is a trick. This is like the first thing I compose is basically put a kick and rim shots on 2 and 4, and then I start to decorate whatever else happens. So for instance, in this part, it's rim shot, ghost, kick, ghost, and then hi-hat, ghost. This is the way I kind of imagine these things. So if I play through them like this, sort of a 3 or 4 note melody. Check this out, a ghost note immediately after the rim shot. Now this is something pretty cool that a drummer would actually do. After playing a loud rim shot, sometimes they would kind of drop the edge of the stick towards the snare, creating like a residual energy from the main drum hit. I just love the way these kind of ghosts sound. And of course, embellishing ghost notes before and after kick drums always sounds fantastic. Now, as I said before, because this is a crowded area, I left more space here. The last thing I want to show you is the drum fill here. Now again, there's the 30-second note sort of pickup on the snare here before the tom. Now this really contributes to the feeling that this is a live drummer. So there's a few things actually that do that. First of all, opening the hi-hat just before the fill. Let's switch back to 16th note. Opening the hi-hat. So just having this in the background is something very common. A drummer would hit an open hi-hat. It's sort of the drummer's pad. So the drummer like plays a pad and then goes through the fill. It creates this feeling of filling in the gaps. So the hi-hat sizzling fills in the gaps between the drum hits. It's something that before you write any drum fill in your life, try playing an open hi-hat on the downbeats just before the fill and have the rest of the drum fill just do whatever. It will allow you to maybe kind of air out the drum fill a bit more instead of feeling like I have to play every 16th note or something. And in terms of the hands moving around, so you have this rough on the snare here, and then tom, 2 snares, second tom, kick, floor. So it's a very natural motion. So you think of the drum kit as being built, let's say, from left to right, so small tom, medium tom, and then floor. And then the snare being a sort of mediator between the drums. So this is, again, something you can use right now. So when you compose drum fills, just, again, think about the melody. So there's the snare is sort of the root tone, and the toms are the scale degrees. So you go like root, note 1, root, note 2, root, note 3, and then you have the kick drum as a sort of, you can also call it like a root tone. It's sort of an octave below what's going on. So alternating between snare and kick as sort of the essence of the kit, and the melodic aspects being the cymbals and the toms. This creates a sort of very natural flow to drum fills, and also accounting for what a drummer can actually do helps. So if your drummer doesn't have 6 hands, you can't play like 4 toms simultaneously. So yeah, let's listen to this entire part again, now knowing what we know with relation to airing out parts of the bar as opposed to having them crowded, the sort of call and response, and then understanding a bit of the melodic aspects of drum composition. Last part here on the chorus, there's a part that sounds like this. Now what I wanted to show you here, the kick and snare, very similar. You have the rim shots going on 2 and 4s. Here, 2, 4, 2, 4, that's the backbeat. Same thing here, kick, ghost, kick, ghost, kick, ghost, interplaying, empty space, crowded space, all of the same elements. The ride plays bell and then 2 standard rides. This is something I really like doing, do like an offbeat ride bell. Again, helps push the music forward. And one of the most important things, if you ever program grooves that mainly rely on ride cymbals like these ones, make sure to close the hi-hat on 8th notes or quarter notes or whatever. This is something almost any drummer would do. Check out what happens if I remove this. I immediately feel like something is missing, like a drummer didn't play this. And with... without... with. Just for fun, I actually even added a tambourine that does another layer here. In order to push the drums towards that funky, tight, aggressive style of somebody like Nate Smith, I used a lot of interplay between kick and snare. I used spacing properly, so leaving parts for the other instruments to sort of express themselves while having other parts really crowded. Overall, you see how the workload is carried between the drum programming and all the elements of sound and articulation that I used in MINDst Drums. So hopefully this was useful. If it is, let me know and I'll make more of these, and have fun.